The AI bubble is about to burst. Michael Burry betting against Nvidia and Palantir. It's looking like the bear market is on its way. But the big question remains, what about comic books? Well, in this video, with our comic book index update, hopefully we're going to answer that question here today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Yes, that is right. We got ourselves a twofer. Two comic index videos in less than 2 months. Look at me. What a gift. Big shout out to my co-host on The Ungraded Truth, who gave me a lot of flack for not making comic book index updates more often. I took that personally. How do you like these apples now? My spite is your guys' gain. And we're going to talk about all the things going on with the comic book market here right now. But before we get into it, I got to give a shout out to two Kickstarters going on right now. Evermind number 1 through 6, the complete collection by Daniel Wu and Sean Chen. We got 21 hours left to go. This, of course, is a 24/7 comic book publishing production. I worked on it. It's a great read. You guys are going to love it. If you decide to back it, head on over to the description. And also, shout out to Bad Idea, Planet Death's original art edition. Their Kickstarter just launched. Of course, Planet Death, the #1 selling independent comic of all time, now has its original art edition. So if you guys are into that, check out this Kickstarter as well. Big shout out to Dinesh and the Bad Idea team. This one is definitely a banger. Now, what is the comic book index? The comic book index is the top 100 sold books per age. I take silver, bronze, and copper. I pick the highest volume of grade. That's the one that I focus on and I count. I take the final sale of each month, aka simulating a market close, and I get all of my info from GPA data. So suffice to say, if I was going to buy the top 100 most in demand, most desired, most bought and sold silver, bronze, and copper age keys, how much would it cost me to do it on a month-by-month basis? Well, the last time I did a comic book index update, we were in the month of August, and it would have cost you $38,388 to buy all of those keys. It kind of had looked like, based on the charts for this calendar year, we were sort of finding that, middle ground. We were actually starting to trade sideways a little bit. Looks like the biggest drops had happened. Looks like the biggest fall-offs were already done. And maybe we were in a place where we actually found, unironically, a bottom or a floor. And it was kind of curious, going into the month of October, where we might be specifically for that of the Silver Age. And surprisingly, we actually had a couple up months back to back. We went from 38,000 to 38,504. And then this particular month, jumping all the way back up to 42,529, which makes this the second highest number we've actually seen for this index in about, a year and a half or so, which was kind of shocking, kind of surprising. I mean, I don't necessarily think that this is like a trend or anything like that. In fact, I actually do think that this is more of an anomaly number. Perhaps this is just one of those months where a lot of people were interested in buying some stuff, and that book that they've had their eye on for, a couple years now was finally the time for them to buy it. Either way, it does sort of look like, yeah, we're kind of trading a little bit in the middle. I expect next month to be a down month once again for silver, but overall, that means that the graph is moving sideways. But, we'll talk a little more macro thoughts, bear and bull thoughts later on in the video. Let's jump forward now to the Bronze Age update, of course, for August of 2025. We actually had a pretty big up month going to $30,941. So similar to that of the Silver Age index, it felt like the Bronze Age index was also kind of trading sideways with a little bit of a leniency towards an upward movement. Well, where do we go here in these last couple months? Well, actually, unlike Silver Age, we went back on the slide going down to 28,400, which puts that in the lower end down in September. And then now in October, $27,364. We have actually hit the lowest number we have seen since that of 2020. Once again, the Bronze Age is definitely on the slide. And it's kind of interesting because the Bronze Age continues to shrink down. Silver Age looks like it's maybe starting to go up. I'm not really sure if this is an indication that Silver Age maybe is starting to pull away. Perhaps the slight rarity that exists in the Silver Age is actually starting to have an effect on the values of those comic books. The Bronze Age, it's still a lot of books in this particular index that are very, very available, that are always getting pulled out of collections, that are always being sent in for grading, and are always, sort of a race to a bottom with a lot of people always looking to sell them. But I'm going to table all these talking points. We're going to unpack these later on in the video. Let's jump forward now to the Copper Age index. In August, we were at 20,485 like the other indexes. We were kind of going sideways. Where do we go here in the month of October? Well, now we are at $19,924. So not the lowest number per se, but definitely definitely a little bit on the decrease as well. Although, for the most part, still kind of trading sideways. And I guess if you kind of compare all the indexes side by side, if we're supposed to, evaluate these indexes and think that they move in parallel, well, Silver Age went up, Bronze Age went down, Copper Age went sideways. Maybe if you kind of average them all, that sort of means that generally speaking, comic books have moved sideways as well. I don't really know if we can make any determinations that, in the aggregate, Silver Age is safer than that of Copper Age. I mean, I do think that it is in general, but you have to remember these are not like necessarily the major quote unquote blue chip keys like AF-15s in the Silver Age. These are more your kind of common Silver Age keys, like your first appearance of Vision and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, is first appearance of Vision really that much more safe than New Mutants 98? I mean, probably, but who knows? All right, let's dive into the numbers here and talk about some key takeaways. Back in August for the Silver Age, we were at $38,388, up to now $42,529 in October. That is an increase of 11%. August for the Bronze Age was $30,941, down here in October to $27,364. That is actually a decrease of 11%. So I do wonder if it's a little bit of a wash. And then in the Copper Age, $20,484 makes this a decrease of 2%. Kind of zooming into the numbers here for Silver Age, we had 11% of the books were down this month, 17% were up. So that was actually kind of the big difference in terms of this number versus the last couple months that we saw. So it really is an indication that we had some major ups on this. And my speculation for that is that, maybe there are just those people out there on eBay that were willing to finally hit the buy it now button. And, for those people, like I said at the beginning of the video, maybe they just hit the point where, hey, we're kind of at the floor. I'm willing to pay, even if it's a slight overpay for what I could get it at auction. And now is the time to buy. For bronze book value, 16% down, 15% up, 16% non-sale. Honestly, a pretty standard month for that of the Bronze Age. Now let's kind of jump into the month-by-month chart. This is one of my favorites to look at. Of course, this is only for Silver Age. And with 2025, we are looking at the pink line. And I think, the prediction for me has always been that, where the dot is in January, it's probably going to end very, very similar to where the dot is in December. And it looks like we're on track for that. I mean, we did kind of, go up here in September and October, but I imagine that if November and December are slightly down, ultimately we kind of end the year where we started. And that was really, to me, going to be, the best indication of, stability within comic books. Because if we're looking at last year, which is the purple line, it had a slight decrease. Where we were in January to December means that we kind of hemorrhaged some value throughout that calendar year, which was less, though, than that of 2023, the cyan line, which was in January to December. We lost a decent amount of value. And then if you go back to 2022, well, you guys all lived through it. We know about 2022. Starting in January, where we went to in December was a massive decline in value because of the green line, which had a massive inflate in value, which was, of course, the COVID prices. So, I was always sort of looking for that time or that year when we're actually going to go sideways. And really the big question is going to be in 2026, are we actually going to see a line that has a slight upward trajectory? Because if we go into, the trend lines here, if we think that comic books at least increase with the rate of inflation, as the value of the dollar is decreased, maybe the comic book values increase as well. I mean, it doesn't have to work that way. I mean, nobody has to buy comic books, but if people still want to buy comic books and there's still people that are buying them, well, just the natural rate of inflation is going to push the values up. And currently right now, even though that this is not drawn to scale, we're kind of in the trend line. Maybe Silver Age is a little bit on the higher end of the trend line and Bronze Age is on a little bit of a lower end of the trend line. But again, this is just one model. It's not a perfect system. It's just, something that I've put together as far as an index, which is why later on in the video, we're going to check in with GoCollect's index as well and talk about their numbers. But until we get there, let's talk a little bears and bulls. Here we are at the end of 2025. And with comic books, it kind of just feels like things are quiet. For the most part, I feel like a lot of the panic selling is done. A lot of the panic buying is certainly done. That was the stuff that was going on in 2021. It feels like there's a lot of apathy towards the movies, people not really interested in the spec stuff anymore. People who are into comic books are more interested in the modern age side of things. We got the blind bag selling like crazy. We got people interested in the Invincible universe and Skybound stuff and Battle Beast. And so that seems to have more eyeballs on it, at least in terms of, the momentum fandom and what the current culture of comic collecting is more interested in, rather than that of, your generic Marvel Age keys or Silver keys, or even your DC keys, like first appearance of Batgirl and things of that nature. But I do sort of wonder if this is actually where, the adage of comic books are recession proof. Do think that there might be some element to this where even if we have a tough stock year next year, I wonder if the comic book panic selling has already been done. And what I mean by that is, remember in 2022, everybody was just flooding collections to their LCS. Everybody was getting out. Everybody was selling all of the stuff that they bought in 21 and 22. And now in 26, even if there is like tough times in the economy, I kind of feel like most of the people who still collect this stuff, most of the people who are still in comic books, probably just going to keep their collections in their attics, in their basements, in their closets, and not really be motivated to move. I just think that, the slow nature of comics right now is probably one of the better things for it finding its floor and kind of creating stability in some of the values and some of the prices. I mean, I do think that we could see an eventual turn for comic books later on in 26. And I do put a lot of stake in the Avengers films. I know that, again, like I already said, spec is kind of dead and all this stuff, but you do need to have the pop culture elements, kind of get people excited and reinvigorated once again. And who knows, if the Avengers movie comes out and it's actually really good, maybe people will be excited about comic books. Actually, I think it has more to do with monetary policy. I think if we do get rate cuts, which is apparently what we're going to be getting, throughout the course of next year, if there's more money in the system, that money will eventually leak over to, speculative assets. And maybe some of that money will leak into collectibles like comic books themselves. Although it does seem like most people are still more interested right now in Pokemon and trading cards, but who knows? So let's hop over to GoCollect CPI chart and take a look at some of their numbers, at least in terms of what they're seeing for the past 3 months. Let's kind of go over here to Silver Age and work our way backwards. So Silver Age in the past 3 months, they sort of see this index as being down 1.88%, which is not as bad as it was, earlier in the year. For Bronze Age, down 2.95%. So that kind of tracks at least with what I saw as far as, Silver Age, even though for me was up, it was down less overall in the last couple months than that of the Bronze Age, which was down more. And then funny enough, Copper Age actually down less than Bronze Age, only down by 0.86%, and actually down less than Silver Age as well. And then Modern Age actually up 2.45%. And this is something, again, I keep mentioning this in many different videos, and I think that there's something to this, but I haven't quite found the words. I can just sort of, talk from, just off the top and just kind of speculate on what's going on here. But there is something about Modern Age and Copper Age being more in sight with collectors than that of Bronze and Silver. I mean, I do think that Bronze and Silver is mostly a Gen X, boomer, older millennial type of comic book, and the younger kids who are more into the influencer space and speculating on Pokemon cards and more interested in that type of market are also the ones that are going to the shows and buying the variants and buying the new modern comic books. And this is even true when you kind of compare it to Golden Age, which Golden Age is only up 0.59% in the last 3 months, which is less than that of modern comic books. So that's kind of interesting to see that there's people that are more excited to kind of play in the market of Modern Age. I mean, it could just be the buy-in. Maybe people just have more money to spend within the Modern Age comic books, but I also do think that there's an attraction to like the volatility of it. There's a newness there. People are more interested in Copper Age and modern stuff and shiny stuff because it feels more fun than sort of buying the Golden Age comic book and watching it go up 0.93% over the course of 6 months. But even when I set this by the past 6 months, I find this so fascinating to me that the Big Spenders Club, which is your major keys, think your Superman ones, your Tech 27s, your Batman number ones, etc., is actually down minus 1.67% over the course of the last 6 months. If we go actually by the year, it's down minus 1%, which is, honestly a pretty awful return considering that the S&P is up 16%. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me kind of giving my update to the comic book index. What do you guys think about the market right now? How are you guys feeling about values of comic books? Do you think that we're going to continue to go down? Do you think that we're kind of starting to find the floor? Do you think that 2026 is going to be a major bear market? And if it is a major bear market, is that going to have an effect on comic book values? Or do you guys actually think that we may finally turn the corner? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.